When I got home that Friday evening, the exhaustion from a long day at work weighed heavily on me. But as soon as I opened the front door, I felt a familiar tension in the air. There she was again, my sister-in-law, Alyssa, lounging in my living room as if it were her own. This had become a common sight lately, ever since her divorce. She claimed to have nowhere else to go, but it was starting to feel like she was trying to settle in permanently. I took a deep breath, trying to maintain composure, but the annoyance bubbled just beneath the surface. Alyssa was chatting animatedly with my husband, David, while our daughter, Mary, sat in the corner, playing by herself. It wasn't that I didn't feel sympathy for Alyssa's situation. Divorce is tough. But this arrangement was starting to feel wrong, and David's attitude wasn't helping. He barely acknowledged me as I entered the room. "Alyssa, I see you're here again," I said, keeping my tone neutral but firm. She smiled, her expression a little too comfortable for my liking. "Yeah, David said I could stay until I figure things out." That was news to me. When had David made this decision without consulting me? I shot him a questioning look, but he avoided eye contact. It was clear that he and Alyssa had already discussed this behind my back. I felt a familiar knot tighten in my stomach. "We should talk about this," I said quietly to David, motioning toward the kitchen. He reluctantly followed me, leaving Alyssa in the living room. Once we were alone, I let my frustration show. "David, we need to set some boundaries. This is our house, not a hotel for your sister to live in indefinitely." He frowned, crossing his arms defensively. "It's my house too, Jane. I bought it with you, remember?" That statement hit me like a slap. "You didn't buy this house, David. It was inherited from my father, and you know that." His eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite place. Guilt, maybe? Or was it defiance? "Well, I'm still your husband. I get a say in who stays here." The tension between us had been growing for weeks, and now it was spilling over. It was as if David had become a different person since Alyssa moved in. He used to be my rock, the person who supported me through the hardest times. But lately, he'd been distant, more concerned with his sister than our family. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "David, this isn't just about you or Alyssa. We have a daughter, and Mary deserves stability. Having your sister here all the time, it's disrupting everything." He shook his head, dismissing my concerns. "You're overreacting. She's family, Jane. She needs us." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. His sister's problems had suddenly become more important than our own family. I wanted to argue further, but the look in his eyes told me it was pointless. For now, at least. That night, as I prepared dinner, Alyssa and David sat in the living room, chatting away like they didn't have a care in the world. Meanwhile, Mary sat on the floor, stacking blocks in silence. The scene was painfully familiar. Alyssa taking up all of David's attention while Mary was left to fend for herself. It broke my heart. When dinner was finally ready, I called them to the table. David joined us, but Alyssa stayed in the living room, glued to her phone. I tried to make conversation, but the tension at the table was thick. David barely spoke to me, and when he did, his words were short and clipped. That night, after Alyssa finally left, I decided to confront David again. "This can't go on like this, David. We need to have a serious conversation about Alyssa staying here." He sighed, clearly irritated. "Not this again, Jane. I told you she's going through a tough time. She just needs some support." I shook my head, exasperated. Support is one thing, but she's practically moved in. She's here all the time, and it's affecting our relationship and Mary's well-being. David looked at me with cold eyes, something I'd never seen before. "Maybe the problem isn't Alyssa. Maybe the problem is you." His words stunned me into silence. For a moment, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was the man who had promised to stand by me through everything. The man who had vowed to love and protect me. And now he was blaming me for the strain in our marriage? I slept in Mary's room that night, unable to bring myself to lie next to David. As I lay there listening to the quiet hum of the house, I couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was wrong. Alyssa's presence was just the tip of the iceberg. The next morning, I woke up early, determined to have a serious talk with David. I couldn't let things continue the way they were. But when I walked into the hallway, I found Alyssa's bags packed by the front door. For a split second, I felt a surge of relief. Was she finally leaving? But then David appeared, looking tense. "Jane, we need to talk." My heart sank. His tone was too serious, too final. "What is it?" I asked, trying to keep the anxiety out of my voice. He hesitated, glancing at Alyssa, who was sitting on the couch with a smug look on her face. "Alyssa's going to be staying here permanently. I've already made the decision." I stared at him in disbelief. "What? You can't be serious. We didn't even discuss this." David shrugged, his expression hard. "It's my house, Jane. I bought it. I decide who stays." His words echoed in my head. My house. How many times had he thrown that in my face recently? But this time, something snapped inside me. I had had enough. "No, David," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "This house was inherited from my father. It's not your decision to make." Alyssa smirked from the couch, clearly enjoying the drama unfolding in front of her. I wanted to scream at her, to throw her out of my house. But I knew that wouldn't solve anything. This was about David, about the man I had married, who was suddenly acting like a stranger. "I'm not asking, Jane," David said, his voice cold and unyielding. "If you don't like it, maybe you should leave." For a moment, I felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. Was he really saying this? Was he really choosing his sister over me? My voice was barely a whisper. "Are you serious?" He nodded, his expression unchanging. "You and Mary can leave if you're not happy." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't the David I knew. The man I had married would never say something like that. But here he was, standing in front of me, practically daring me to leave. I had to remind myself to breathe. I had to stay calm for Mary's sake. "David, you're making a mistake," I said, my voice shaky but firm. "This is our family. We should be working through this together, not pushing each other away." But he just shook his head, his expression unreadable. "I've made my decision." The rage and hurt I had been holding in for weeks boiled over. I stormed into the study and pulled out a folder of documents, papers that proved the house belonged to me. I marched back into the living room and threw them down on the coffee table in front of David and Alyssa. "Here," I said, my voice trembling. "This is proof that this house was left to me by my father. It's in my name, not yours." David looked down at the documents, his face paling as he realized what they were. Alyssa's smirk faded as she glanced nervously between us. "You lied to your parents, to Alyssa, even to yourself," I continued, my anger finally breaking through. "You didn't buy this house. You have no right to decide who stays here." David opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He looked down at the papers, the weight of his lies crashing down on him. I stood there, waiting for him to say something, anything, to make this right. But all he did was sit there in stunned silence. David's parents came over later that day, likely expecting another one of his fabricated stories about how he had bought the house. But when they saw the documents I had laid out, their expressions quickly shifted. They weren't just angry, they were embarrassed. "We had no idea," David's father muttered, clearly ashamed of the lies his son had spun. His mother looked at me with genuine regret. "We're so sorry, Jane. We didn't know he was lying." I nodded, my heart heavy. "I know, but I can't keep living like this." David sat in silence, staring at the floor as his parents scolded him for the deception. But I wasn't interested in their family dynamics anymore. My mind was made up. "This marriage is over," I said quietly but firmly. "I want a divorce." David finally looked up at me, panic flashing in his eyes. "Jane, wait. Let's talk about this." But it was too late. My decision had been made. The love I once had for him was gone, replaced by a cold emptiness that came from weeks of betrayal and manipulation. The divorce process moved quickly after that. David signed the papers without much resistance, knowing that he had no leg to stand on. His parents, though disappointed, supported my decision. Alyssa disappeared from our lives, no longer the smug presence in my home. She was gone just as quickly as she had arrived. Now, it's just Mary and me in the house. My house, the one my father left to me. There's a strange peace in the quiet. No more tension, no more arguments, just the two of us living our lives as we should have been all along. Mary is thriving, happy to have the house back to herself. She doesn't ask about David much, and I don't push. It's better this way, for both of us. As I look around the house, I'm filled with a sense of relief. This house, once a battleground of lies and manipulation, is now a sanctuary again. A place where my daughter and I can create new memories, just as my father had wanted. I don't know what the future holds, but for the first time in a long while, I feel hopeful. And I know, whatever comes next, I'll face it with strength and clarity. This is my home. I don't know what the future holds, but for the first time in a long while, I feel hopeful. And I know, whatever comes next, I'll face it with strength and clarity. This is my home, and I'm finally free to live in it the way I was meant to.